everything looks good. Everything is fitting just right. So let's give it a start up.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the Ninja One YouTube channel. In today's video we are going to install racetrack fairings on this 24 ZX6R 40th anniversary edition. But before we do that, we got to take all the fairings off. And if you recall in one of my previous videos where I uninstalled the fairings, I did not uninstall the nose. So in today's video, I will include an install on the nose with specific instructions to help walk you through this process. So before we get started, let's take a look at the tools and the parts. All right, here are all the tools I used for the project. You will have a detailed list of the tools that I used that will include the different sizes for like the hex wrenches, the sockets, the hex sockets, etc. And in addition, some items I had to use to support the project to include this heat tape that I used for the belly pan next to the muffler, as well as washers purchased from Home Depot to use as spacers. These are all the fasteners I've collected over the years. And then fasteners I used on a previous project. You'll see where I use these in the video. And then of course, the service manual for torque settings. So once again, one last look at all the tools. Now moving over to the parts, we have the brackets that go on the rear of the front fender that mount the brake lines. There's a left and a right. And then we have a rivet, OEM, there's 4 of those, 2 each for each bracket. And then we have 4 washers that go on the back side of the rivet, and there's 2 each for each bracket. And then we have an assortment of panel fasteners. I'm not sure if we're going to use these, but we'll give it a shot. All right, here are the Armour Bodies Racetrack Fairings for the 2024 ZX6R 40th Anniversary Edition. I purchased these at Kawasaki Suzuki of Rome in Rome, Georgia, and in partnership with their new vendor, Woodcraft. I am really impressed with the finish on this and the fitment. I did a couple of dry fits, not really taking anything off, but just kind of lining it up. And I am really impressed. I'm looking forward to see how much I'm going to have to modify. I don't think I will have to modify much. Just the belly pan for the grade shorty, I think, is the only thing I'm going to have to do. And then, of course, I got to do the undertail to make that tail fit. But the bottom line is I'm really pleased with it. And the gray is okay. Understandably, if you get it painted, you're going to have to pay a little more. And I like the idea that you can paint it on your own and, throw some stickers on there. So with that said, we are going to go ahead and start tearing this baby apart. Stand by. All right, now that I got all the fairings off, we are going to dive into the belly of the beast. I'm going to start taking all this stuff apart off of the undertail, and the objective is to get this off and then to try lining it up with the Armour Bodies from Woodcraft, that tail section. That's the concept there. And the reason why I have the tank off is because we got all this back here that's holding it on. Then we have a couple bolts right here on both sides, and then we got these two bolts up here. I wasn't able to reach those with the tank on, so the idea is to take this off and then line it up with the tail over here. And then, speaking of the fuel tank, I got it down here covered up, and I got a 2x4 under here, and I have it the pump itself resting on the 2x4 with the nozzle free, not really any pressure on it at all. So there you go. There's all the parts. I'll bag those up later, and we'll go from there. So stand by. As you seen just a moment ago, we pretty much got the tail off. And with that said, it made me kind of think what I want to do next. And what I do want to do next is put this tail together. So I did a dry fit, and it worked out great. I was able to get that entire tail inside the fairing piece here, and everything lined up perfectly. I was even able to put the screws on. So the good news is I don't have to cut that tail. All right. So what I do have to get done is I'm going to have to drill out some of these holes. They're a little bit tight, so I'm going to go ahead and drill those out. And this is the drill that I'm using. It might be different for you in your situation, so but at least you get an idea of what you might be expected to do. And the reason I think is just obviously they painted it, or I'm sorry, primed it, and then there's probably a little bit more on there than you want. So it'll be a lot easier to get the screws on and get that final fit in it. Other than that, I am going to have to remove a couple things off the tail fairings for the original pieces, and one is that rubber grommet there, and then the little damper rubber thing there, and I'm going to mount those onto the new Armour body. So the lock I'm on for the seat, I'm going to keep that on. It works no problems. Just got to make sure that as I'm sliding it on, I got to get that cable on because it's pretty much unreachable. But as far as hardware goes to hold all this together, I've gone through all my extra bolts and screws, and I actually got a kit a couple years ago, fairing screw kit, and I'm going to use this compression washer with a compression rubber nut and this nylon washer and the screw to go on the sides here and here. And then I want to use these two here to do the undertail, to hold that up onto the back brace, the bottom back brace on the subframe. So that little brace right there. So there's some, and that's where the Yoshimura Fender Eliminator went. So I'm using 2 of the existing bolts that came with the kit. All right, and then on top of that, we're going to use these 2 screws, same as these 2, but these are actually going to bolt into the top here. You'll see how I'm able to, wrangle that undertail in there in the video. So let's see, what do we got here? We've got the nose. So let me show you the nose. The nose is been dry fitted. Everything worked out great. I do highly recommend taping off those corners as you fit it, those edges, so they don't scratch up anything on the frame or potentially your windscreen. I've already taken the tape off on that. I'm ready to do a final fit. And then I got the underbelly under there. I haven't drilled any holes for that yet, but we'll get to that point. I think I'm going to put 2, maybe 3 mounting screws on both sides, and then of course got the tail screws. I am going to have to trim off that back right corner to accommodate that grave shorty. All right, I already know that. I'm going to see where my limitations are on that when I do a volume test on this here. I'm going to see how high it goes inside for 5 liters, and then that'll let me know where my limit is on how much I can cut off that corner to make it fit. You'll see that in the video. Then I did make some screws. I didn't make screws, but I made, I assembled something for the rectifier. Okay, of course, the rectifier has to be, relocated because there are no mounting points like there are on the original fairing. So if you look at the original fairing, this is your mounting point here for it. Okay, and there are no mounting points on the Armour body. So what I did is, once I did that dry fit on the fairing, I slid it down into the cavity between the outer and the inner. I am going to space it away from that fairing on the inside because it does get hot, and we don't want that melting the fairing or anything, but it'll provide better airflow over the top and bottom. And I did kind of a test fit to kind of see how much space there would be available on the top and the bottom of this as it's mounted. And it actually is going to kind of mount in this direction. Okay, and there's plenty of room for airflow. And it's pretty light, so I don't think it's going to be too much of a strain on the fairing. But that is where we are. I just wanted to take a moment to kind of share with you, what is the method to the madness. And as you can tell in here, it's kind of a madhouse. But I wanted to make sure you had everything you needed. And then obviously, as we move on and throughout this video, I have instructions. And if you follow those step by step, they will have time marks, and it'll take you exactly where you need to go to do that specific task, even down to removing all that wiring harness from the belly. So I am going to get started, and now you know, and we all will be on the same sheet of music. So stand by.
right, here we are, and it is looking awesome. So we got the tail finished. It's completely done. There's nothing else to do to it. I got the push pins in there, and it's looking great. It's absolutely beautiful. The fit is absolutely perfect. I got the entire undertail inside that fairing, and I can use the seat lock. Looks great. Got all this stuff sorted out, and I actually put the battery in to make sure everything turned on without any issues. And aside from the fuel pump, obviously, other than that, everything went together great. It went together absolutely great. So I'll show you that seat and how it fits here just a second. Wow, look at that fitment, just beautiful, just absolutely beautiful. And I did put the side fairings on, and those lined up perfectly. Everything is lining up great. It just looks killer for sure. All right, so that's where we're at. All right, let me show you how well it works. Cool. All right, that works out great. And if you look in there, you can see I have the existing hardware for the well, the rubber grommets that were on the original fairings. Okay, but everything looks good. You'll see everything you need to see in the video, and of course the instructions. So what's next? Well, I'll tell you what's next, but I want to explain something first about this front fender, why I haven't done it yet. Reason why is because I already looked at the fitment of that fender, and it's going to line up perfectly. So we're going to do that after we get the upper fairing on. And the reason why I want to wait is because the bike has to be lifted. You can't take the fender off when the bike is either sitting or on the stand. So you got to take the wheel off. Now, what are we going to do next? Well, we are going to put the fairing on, and before we put the fairing on, we're going to have to drill out these holes a little bit bigger. But you see, I put some painter's tape there on the sharp edges, and that'll prevent it from getting, scuffed up on the frame. And we are going to locate the rectifier in this area on the left side, and where we're going to mount it is going to be approximately right here on the left side. Is where we're going to put a screw there, and then we're going to put another one over here, right there. Okay, so you'll see it in the video, but I think it's probably the best place to put it. I could put it on top, but I'm kind of stretching the main harness. I didn't want to do that. This way, it's going to put less stress on the harness, and it's actually in the place where it was originally on the left. So what I have done is I put together some screws, nuts, and a spacer, and this is how we're going to mount it onto the fairing. So this screw head here is going to be on the outside, like in this way, and then we're going to have the nylon washer underneath that head of that screw. That's going to go through the hole of the fairing, and then we are going to put the spacer on, and then put the rectifier on with a lock washer and nut. And then we're going to lock it in. And I've already did kind of a dry test fit. And there is going to be plenty of airflow all the way around this thing. Exactly how it's mounted on the original, where it's kind of got its own bracket that spaces it away from the fairing. But we're going to be able to mimic that just a different way. All right, so that is pretty much it where we're going. The hardware, now this is the hardware we're going to use for the fairing. So these are the original bolts that go onto the rear portion of that inner cowl, and that mounts right here on the frame, right there in that location. Same on the other side. That's the drill bit we're going to use to make that hole bigger. And then we got 4 screws here for the windscreen. These are the original. And that's the drill bit. We're going to bore out the holes a little bigger. And then we got these 2 fairing screws that I got from the fairing screw kit. I also had some extra clips there. I think from years ago. And they just happen to fit. And those clips are going to clip onto the bottom of the air box right there. And there's one on the other side. Okay. And that'll fasten those 2 holes up to it. And then we've got the drill bit. That's going to be the same one we use for the windscreen. Then we have a drill bit and 4 screws for the mirror. Of course, we're not using the mirror. We're going to do the Pillion mirror block off plates. Okay, and that's the drill bit we're going to use for that. And then finally, we got this last machine screw here with a nut and a lock washer. And we're going to use that to mount this bracket to the stay bracket. Just like that. And you'll see that in the video. And then the rest of these wires, we're going to go ahead and just zip tie up. But that's where we're at. And as you can tell, everything I'm doing is reversible. So that's the idea. When I'm not on the track, I'd like to be able to put this thing back together for the street in a reasonable time. And hopefully doing all this will get me there a little quicker. All right, so we're going to move on, and we're going to start with the nose. So stand by. All right, the nose is on. Everything is fitting really good. So let me give you a look down here in the cavity here. I got the rectifier in there, and you can see that how it's spaced. Plenty of room for air. And then I just kind of bundled everything up. You see it doubled over there. Those two wires there are doubled over. Actually, that's one wire. I just doubled it over from where it is on the zip tie underneath the air intake. And then pretty much, you know, mounted that bracket. I think that's the original spot. And then I kind of zip tied everything together. And then coming down the side here, I was having a problem with the fairing touching this area on the frame. So you'll see in the video I put a spacer, and I used a different screw. It was a little longer than the original, and it's got a smaller head on it, but it works. It does what it needs to do, and you can see there's nothing touching. Everything is nice. Everything is nice. And then on this side, same thing. Nice tight fit. Got a spacer right there on that screw behind the fairing and the bracket that it mounts to. So we are done with the nose, and then we got two more pieces. We got the fender, and then we got the belly. And I'll be done. I'll load up, go to the racetrack. Woohoo! Barber. All right, so got to get all these videos uploaded and double check, make sure I got everything. But I'm really, really, really pleased. So stand by. We'll be right back. All right, I have the belly dry fitted right now. Nothing's fastened or drilled yet. And I just wanted to show you how I got it prepared. I got a zip tie in there for that fastener. And then on this side, I just have it taped up there by the seam. And then I have this loose right now. All right, this is what I have. All right, so I have 4 rubber compression nuts with fairing screws and nylon washers. And those are gonna go right here. I'm gonna put one in the center here, and then one here. And do the same on the other side. And this is the drill bit for the screw portion, the outer panel. And this is the drill bit for the rubber nut well, compression nut. Okay. And then for the rear of the fairing, we're just using the stock bolt for the left side. That's got the collar and the nylon washer. And then for the right side, we've got a longer bolt. I'm going to space this out on the right side. And then we have the collar with the nylon that was stock on the bike. I got 2 washers to help space it out, along with this spool for a pit bull. So I'm going to use this as a spacer. So let me show you how that is. I'll set you up. All right, so I have all the pieces here. I got a longer bolt. I got a spacer, which used to be a spool. I got 2 flat washers that make it a little bit thicker. And then I have the original collar with nylon washer that goes here for the original fairing. So I don't have this drilled yet for the bigger bolt. So I got this little one here just to simulate what it looks like up against this muffler. So let me show you how I put all this together. So I'm going to put this in, and I'm going to feed this through And that skinny bolt is representing the actual bolt I'm going to use. And then I'm going to put the washers on. And then I'll put the spacer on. And I'll put the larger side towards the inside of the fairing. And then I'm just gonna kind of feed it in there and get an idea of how it looks. But you can see there's a nice little gap right here when I do this. So to take care of how close it is here, I got this heat tape. I'm going to put a couple strips down here. So to get this finalized, we're going to basically drill 2 holes. We're going to drill one here, and we're going to drill one towards the front, same on the other side, and then we're going to, of course, drill this hole here on both sides to accommodate this larger bolt. And I am going to take this off and set you up for the drilling part. Stand by. Well, here she is, all fairinged out, ready for track day, which is tomorrow. So this will be the first start after taking everything apart and putting the fairings on. But everything looks good. Everything is fitting just right. So let's give it a start up.